It's July, I think, 19th, 2023. Um, I just finished up a Zoom call, my standing call once a week with the locals. Um, and so on the Apple, from the Apple. Um, so I'm watching, before before the call, since that's really what my whole morning is now revolved around. um, Live with Kelly and Mark was on season one for them, episode 68 of how things have changed drastically in the New York landscape, in TV producer land, and movies, and all sorts of stuff that's going on that I'm not a part of, um, not an active participant in, anyhow. So it says Live with Kelly and Mark, and they had on somebody who I had seen in like the wholesome movies from my youth. Not that I saw a whole lot, but like he's the like Honey I Shrunk the Kids. Like I don't know if he was in that one, but Steve Guttenberg. But he's like that genre of dad, and um, that I like the wholesome kind that I grew up on in New York City. At least that's what was in the movies, or what was allowed through my father, allowed me to see that type of dad as role model or example of way of being, uh, while I was being tended to at the Glen. Um, so I'm watching Steve's message, or Gutenberg's message today, and he's talking about his dad as his dad ages, as his dad got old, and then his dad, who's his hero, says to him um, that he's sorry that you have to see me this way. And I honestly, when I think of my forebearers and I think of my forefathers, um, and I think cat, four, quattro, and via, I'm I'm like, what message, how do I preface my position in, I did not want to sin the body of New York at all. I never want to be held accountable for that myself personally, but especially in these dark times that it looks like we're in medieval science. Um, so I'm going to put on this Gutenberg message because, I mean, the way that he feels about his dad is really how I feel about New York at this point, and the disgusting whatever it's become. Um, and I'm going to go from there, and then I'm going to try to listen to Trump and like have a heart, like back in like the day, like way that people used to look at John F. Kennedy or any of the other forefathers. That, I mean, like, again, if I think of the Northern Territory known as the United States of America, and knowing that we have an administrator for a reason, and he's in charge of all the Jews, but like the Jews in the Italian Roman Empire of JU, the ones, I mean, while some live way above the means of others, there's some of us who don't live well at all. And I look to he as like the fathers of this area of the JU, in the Northern Hemisphere, knowing where my father's origin story began and what mountain range he comes from. Um, and so I'm listening and I'm thinking to myself, my God, if anybody ever sees this message of how dressed at the moment, I don't look very like supernatural in a Ptolemy way, of like this supernatural child. I mean, when you hear of these things and you know what their power is, you would think that one would tend to them and make sure that they're cared for, like, and not give them a 6 foot under story. Like a 6 foot over is, I mean, that's the way you paint the world right. But I'm not at the moment in a perfect system, a fair or perfect system, and I have proof and evidence of it. Um, so I'm just going to make note of it. But I'm going to begin with Guttenberg doing the verse for me of like, I'm really sorry, Father, for like, I don't want you to see me in this condition, but there's some things that are going on in the local world, and I don't want to look this way either. But I have no 6 foot over to care for me, um, and I don't like what I'm seeing on so many levels. He was your hero. Yeah, you were his hero. So now talking about heroes, like again, this is my hero. This is the only face of a hero I've ever seen, other than my uncle, who in calcaneus calculus, when I arrived, who worked for the U.S. Navy, who's now died, and I did not inherit any of his pearls of Pearl Station wisdom or anything else that I'm aware of. But he was solar system correct in calcaneus calculus for astronomy purposes from where I arrived. And he was the face of the US that I had readily access to. And Judy would bring me to visit him at grandma's house, because at the time he lived with grandma and the children that he had with his wife. And he was my superhero for like alien purposes. And then later on in my life, I had another important astrological whatever in the supernatural realm of things with the child that I carried forward. Um, but back then, he was the superhero I had that I could visit in person. Um, Now I can, I have very limited access to my son, but this, as far as forefathers, is the one. I mean, I have Lewis, but he's not always plugged in or wired in right. I don't know why. I don't know if that's things that he's been exposed to and things that he doesn't speak of, and frightening, whatever. But this is the only forefather that I have left that I think of, and like, he exists somewhere out there, um, or the ideology of whatever he stands for, and that would be the superhero of what I grew up with. You were his hero at the end as well. I hope so. Yeah. My dad, one time, he was sitting on the edge of the bed and he said, I'm so sorry that you have to see me like this. And I said, I'm sorry too, Dad, but you're my hero. And he said, you're my hero. And, we hugged each other, and, it's the thing of life. You gave him a beautiful. Listen, we have to take a break. So I'm going to go from that very real conversation that he had this morning on Kelly and Mark. And then I'm going to go to this New York housewives and how they've redecorated New York. And I don't know how, or like whatever. And I'm also going to show like they're going after Trump. And he's like the other New York person. And I'm just like, what is going on here? So again, like, almost a message like, I'm sorry you had to see me this way, but this is what's been going on. And I don't know who's responsible for this level of theater. So again, like, and I said this morning on Bible study in front of the other GOD representative. I'm like, my origin story does not start in Israel. It just doesn't. Um, I have a different spelling, even though the sound's the same, as JEW and JU sound when they're spoken the same. They're not the same. Geographically, they're two totally different areas. Um, and at straddle, that's important between how I supernaturally look at things. Um, so I'm watching what's now calling itself Real Housewives of New York City, knowing somewhere there's a war theater that goes by Real Sport, REAL Sport, and it's the war theater of the war machine. Um, and so they're coming out now and painting themselves into New York City. But one of the men are from Israel. He's not American. And I don't know how this is here. I mean, again, I'm praying to the Father that exists at the Federal Reserve, for which they gave me notes, and for which is United States of America. And I don't know why they would install the house looking this way. It's like redecorating the furniture without permission and without announcement or even election. I wasn't asked. They just installed this.
Dick and different, but we have so much fun together.
Okay, silly face.
If you're looking for the real representation of New York, this is us.
The built-in.
So she said that. It's her words, not mine. And now, is that like the Russian Real Sport version of Real Housewives? Because I'm in America and my look of real is very different for what actually is allowed to be housed in the Housewives for this. That would be something that looks very symbiotic, like myself. So, because my son looks like this also, that's my expectation for him. This is not.
And family, we love you.
The secret ingredient? Darling, it's me.
My lashes may be fake.
And one of them speaks Swahili. I don't know where she's from either.
Fake, but I definitely keep it real.
I'm a true New Yorker. The only bull I'll take is by the horns.
I always bring the flavor. It's not my fault you don't have any taste.
In New York, there's a lot of bad apples, but I'm the baddest of the bunch. I love to laugh, but make me mad, and I'll date your dad.
This is a recent cast change. New York never looked like that. Not that I was happy with whatever but again, it's at the dollhouse level of whatever, so I'm not making any comments on what was here before. But this cast change is very much a problem on a few different levels. I'm going to pause this now, and then I'm going to go to, I likened this almost to the Menendez brothers who killed their father and mother on the couch, and seeing the horror of that blood on the couch is what looking at this is like for me at the moment, knowing I grew up like Steve Guttenberg. Like, that was the ideal gentle father, loving father, in the New York area at the same time I was here. And that level of expectation of what family looks like. Not that he's my family, but again, it just is a very like broad brush of that word. And now I'm going to go to what's going on at former President Trump, because it seems, I don't know who's going after him. They made him a target of something. I don't know what that's about, but I'm going to pause this for a minute, and I'm going to go to the message of he and what he's saying to the American public and to the audience, for which I'm a witness of. So this is CBS Morning's E143, and the year's 2023.
Out of Washington, and the latest on former President Donald Trump, who says he's been informed that he is indeed a target of the criminal investigation into the events of January 6, 2021. The central question: did the former president intentionally inspire the violence that day at the Capitol as a way to hold on to power? Special counsel Jack Smith has not announced any charges as of yet, but the former president is already using his possible indictment on the campaign trail. Robert Costa has been following all of this for us this morning. Bob, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Tony. Well, former President Donald Trump could now be facing his third indictment since March, this time related to a sweeping federal investigation of his alleged role in trying to overturn the 2020 election. Now, Trump has denied any wrongdoing and last night took his message directly to Iowa voters.
Former President Donald Trump defiant in the key state of Iowa, insisting he's innocent.
I didn't know practically what a subpoena was and grand juries and all of this. Now I'm like becoming an expert. I have no choice because we have to. It's a disgrace.
He grew up in Queens also. That's where I am at the moment. So again, I don't know his level of education. I don't know any of that stuff about the man. I just know that he grew up in New York, just like my mom did, just like I did. But he's learning. But he also is at a much higher level, and he was the representation of the JU, or the administrator, or whichever. I mean, I don't even know how to properly orient myself in that conversation, but he seems to be being attacked through the judicial system, which starts with the letter JU, and I don't know why or by whom, especially with what just arrived in like redecoration of furniture to things that don't look American, and they're not claiming to be American, and I'm not all right with it, but I don't know where at Homeland Security to raise my hand and have my complaint put on file that I'm not all right with this new cast of what Real Housewives look like.
The leading Republican candidate still repeating the lie he won the last election.
We won twice, as you know, and we're going to win again, and we're going to win big.
Trump revealed this latest legal warning on social media Tuesday after he says his lawyers received a target letter Sunday night saying he's been given a very short 4 days to report to the grand jury to testify and predicting a possible indictment. Republicans are denouncing the move, saying it's politically motivated.
President Trump went up in the polls and was actually surpassing President Biden for re-election. So what do they do now? Weaponize government to go after their number one opponent.
But Democrats who served on the House committee which investigated January 6, which included Republicans, disagree.
The president was a central figure in an effort to overturn an election, an effort to interfere with a peaceful transfer of power. If anyone else had done the things he did, they would be under investigation.
Prosecutors don't send...
I don't get this. Peaceful transfer of power to whom? Because what's like moved themselves in New York City looks more like squatters again, which I heard Washington with this Obama thing had a problem down there, and now I'm experiencing it in New York. Where is my military that, like, I mean, again, with the backing of the U.S. Treasury, where's my protection? Where's my military at Real Sport? I'm just curious, because these outcomes are frightful, especially I'm supernatural in a Ptolemy kind of a way with like calcaneus calculus, and I've had several issues of being forced to stay amongst humanity at the 6 foot under category rather than being allowed to have a 6 foot over.
send target letters unless they are all but certain to bring an indictment.
Former Justice Department official Thomas Dupree says the potential charges could come within days or weeks.
We don't know precisely what charges the special counsel will bring, but by and large, the potential charges he's facing here are far more serious, far more significant than what he's already facing in the Mar-a-Lago case.
That Mar-a-Lago case, also brought by special counsel Jack Smith, related to his handling of classified material and resulted in 37 criminal charges against Trump, all of which he pled not guilty. On Tuesday in Florida, the Trump-appointed judge Eileen Cannon held the first hearing in that case and signaled she will likely push back the December trial date.
And in other charges related to the 2020 election, Michigan's Attorney General Dana Nessel, a Democrat, has announced 16 so-called fake electors are now facing felony charges for their push to overturn the election results in that state. The charges allege the 16 defendants filed false documents claiming they were certified electors for the 2020 presidential race, all as part of a coordinated effort to award the state's 16 electoral votes to Trump. At the time, some were local officials and some ranking members of their county GOP or the state Republican Party. Each of those defendants now faces 8 felony counts, including forgery charges. Nate?
Bob, on top of it as usual, thank you. For a look at what the latest
Now, it also came to my attention, which I made a different piece of video on, is that in this Iron Man 2 scenario, that came out, I think in 2010, that it mentions like these two, and then they're surrounded and they've created something called a kill box, where like these are things that people that study and perform at like real sport in like the defense contractors, that I think this is like their like expertise and forte. I'm just civilian and I've got a really important clock piece at Ptolemy and like astronomy and astrology, and there's some real supernatural stuff that's going on, and I don't have like a qualified supernatural like representative to report to, or even to have these conversations with. And I just feel like there's something missing here. I don't know what the missing piece or the missing link is. I'm going to go to, they also came out with, they're holding something in the House about a UFO or a UAP, which it kind of brings me comfort. I'm hoping, as long as it's argued in the correct way. Now, this is something on News Nation I was able to catch called Elizabeth Vargas Reports.
We're now just a little more than a week away from a highly anticipated UFO hearing on Capitol Hill. House Oversight Committee members and GOP representatives Anna Paulina Luna of Florida and Tim Burchett of Tennessee confirmed to News Nation the hearing will take place next Wednesday. They've provided no further details. The hearing comes in response to whistleblower David Grush's claims that the U.S. government has UFOs of non-human origin in its possession. Grush spoke about his claims exclusively on News Nation.
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
News Nation's Joe Khalil has more for us tonight on the upcoming hearing. And Joe, we've heard from Speaker McCarthy about this today for the first time.
Yeah, we did. He sort of laughed it off and, he sounded a bit skeptical about it. But, as we know, many lawmakers feel that way. A lot of lawmakers don't feel so skeptical about it anymore. And so we now have a date set for this, what's going to be an unprecedented hearing. You may remember we broke the story a month back that this hearing was going to happen at all. We now know when. And for all of the Americans across the country who are wondering what the government may know about UAPs that it's not sharing with the public, we may get some insight into that a week from Wednesday. Mark it on the calendar. Lawmakers set an official date, July 26th, for a first-of-its-kind hearing focused on UFO or UAP sightings and whistleblower accounts that claim elements within the government are hiding details about these craft from Congress.
If you talk to some of the best pilots in the world and they tell you that they've seen these objects, and then when they do report it, they get interrogated for like up to 8 hours and they get a blemish on their records.
Congressman Tim Burchett, along with Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who together will lead this hearing next week in Washington, both confirmed to News Nation their date is set, but wouldn't elaborate on who specifically will testify. When asked about recent whistleblower claims sure to come up at the hearing, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said he was skeptical.
If we had found a UFO, I think the Department of Defense would tell us because they probably want to request more money. So I'd love to see whatever facts and information we have, and it's good. I'm very supportive of letting the American public see whatever we have.
White House National Security Council spokesman Admiral John Kirby tells News Nation's Blake Berman the administration and the Pentagon don't take UAP claims lightly.
We would have stood up an organization at the Pentagon to analyze and try to collect and coordinate the way these sightings are reported. If we didn't take it seriously, of course we do. I mean, some of these phenomena we know have already had an impact on our training ranges for, when pilots are out trying to do training in the air and they see these things, they're not sure what they are, and it can have an impact on their ability to perfect their skills. So it already had an impact here.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill still working to finalize some details of the hearing. Congresswoman Luna and others setting expectations high, saying it'll be intriguing, adding the public won't be disappointed. So, Elizabeth, we mentioned again that we don't know exactly who is going to be testifying just yet and some of the specific details about what will be presented. But you're hearing this for the first time now exclusively on News Nation that 2 days from now, this Wednesday, the committee is going to be holding a public press conference, and I am told they are going to be revealing some of that information a week ahead of the actual hearing. So presumably 40 or 48 hours from now, I'm not great at math, we will get some more information about that, Elizabeth.
All right. Stay tuned, as they say. Joe Khalil, thanks so much.
Now, this morning on the same episode of CBS, if I close my eyes and I just use my ears, they kept making mention of Private King. And I'm like, Private King? Because then when I open my eyes and I see a picture of this U.S. soldier detained in North Korea, I'm like, no, that's curious. Because he's also calling himself an American, and I'm like, no, again, he's not he doesn't fit the picture of North American, so that gets confusing on keeping the image and consistently amongst cross-culture and languages, but yet he's calling himself an American, and I'm just like, Again, at like name, image, and likeness, where branding counts, and what do you actually have to fall back on? Well, the reminder I have is what was, and still exists within the system.
North Korea is saying nothing about an American soldier who crossed the border from South Korea yesterday. Private Travis King willfully walked into North Korean territory during a visit to the
So his name is Travis King, but because he's part of this, they call him a U.S. soldier, they put this word private in front of his name, but his last name happens to be King. And so now they're calling him a private king. And I'm like, he's not the king that's ever been acknowledged in New York. They only just had a coronation that they've televised on CBS. I also documented that. And the only king they've ever announced within my lifetime here was King Charles III as Rex. They have never acknowledged another king within my life frame. So that's confusing because they're calling him a U.S. soldier. They're calling him king. They call him this word private, which at public, that gets confusing in this very serious need for very clear lines of communication. And then the pictorial image of using this word king does not fit North America, the English language, the King of England at the moment, the current one. So now that gets in my New York media. So I'm going to just make mention of that, and then I'm going to go back to where Stephen Guttenberg has to, like, where he talks about, like, his father, his hero, almost just, like, you know, feeling like I'm sorry you have to see me this way.
Militarized zone, or DMZ there. Our Elizabeth Palmer knows all about that border between the two Koreas, and she's been following this story, monitoring the latest developments from London. Liz, good morning to you.
Good morning. Yes, private travel.
And now she is what looks like the Kingdom of London, or the United Kingdom at the moment. She's got the clock, again, that's the Big Benjamin, or Big Ben, and she's in this place called London for geographic, like, prominence. That's what I saw when I went to London. London was filled in the late 1980s, before 1990, was filled with people that looked like myself and her. So that was the London that I took a plane from New York and entered Heathrow in the correct time frame for placement.
This king was actually supposed to be on his way back to the United States from South Korea, where he was stationed after serving some jail time for assault. But rather than get on the airplane, he joined a tour group headed for the heavily mined border area between...
Because in some places with this new, I hear China calls it an airship, some call it a spy balloon. But in the day and age of FCC and like telecommunications, where if your transmission is picked up by just anybody, I mean, where is the standard bar set of what an American looks like, of what a United Kingdom representative looks like in the European section? What do other territories? I mean, usually it's the gold bar standard is the currency. And at the moment, there's some issue with teleportation through the television system of these on-air reporters and journalists claiming to be all sorts of things, but I don't know how they substantiate their claims to be in that industry or to be in that job function when they're almost falsifying the record and then put other people's lives in jeopardy and peril because they are not an accurate, true representation of what is currently there, or if they have permission. Again, it doesn't say it on the screen.
Between North and South Korea. The DMZ itself is a strip of wilderness stretching 160 miles between the two Koreas. But Private King chose this place, famous for diplomatic encounters like President Trump's meeting with Kim Jong-un, to make his move. CBS News visited that area in February. Ever since the beginning of COVID, when North Korea really sealed its borders, it's been virtually impossible for anyone to get in or out. But it turns out all it took was nerve and will, because at the start of the pandemic, North Korea, for some reason, removed all the guards on its side. The tour group's bus had dropped them in the so-called joint security area of the DMZ. You can see the border between the two countries in red runs right through the buildings. One of the tourists there said they just left those blue buildings known as Meeting Row when the soldier bolted over the border. Private King was with the American forces stationed in South Korea. A U.S. official said he was being sent back to Fort Bliss, Texas to face possible military discipline and to be discharged. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says he believes he's now in custody inside North Korea.
I'm absolutely foremost concerned about the welfare of our troops.
Now, as you mentioned, North Korea hasn't commented at all on the incident, and it's going to be a challenge to get information about Private King, let alone access to him, because the U.S. has no diplomatic representation in North Korea, and most of the Western officials who might have acted for the U.S. were forced to leave during the pandemic. Nate?
Wow. We will stay tuned, Elizabeth Palmer. Thank you.
So now, they didn't show a picture of him on CBS, and that's where I heard this Private King. Where I did see his photo was on a different news program. I'm going to try to pull that up. So on the World News Tonight with David Muir, this is what they're saying was inside of the U.S. Army. So again, there's the United States of America, and then there's the U.S. that operates outside of our borders somewhere else. But again, they keep just referring, because they see the U.S. symbol, that they are American. But I don't know what nation they're united with in order to wear this U.S. Army piece.
News involving a U.S. Army soldier now being detained in North Korea. The Pentagon.
Now, this is the program here. I see the colors that they're wearing at the moment. I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to go back to the Guttenberg where he speaks of his hero. Here's them talking about caretaker. Now, I don't want this to be confused with what's going on at the moment with my children, because that is a whole separate subject matter.
And I'm certain there must feel like a tremendous void in your life.
Yes, huge hole. My dad and I were best friends.
Yeah.
And we were best friends since I was a little kid. I grew up in Borough Park, Brooklyn, then Flushing, Queens. Yeah. All right. And then Massapequa. Anybody Long Island? Long Island. All right. And I have the greatest mom and dad. And and it's hard to see your dad aging. And it's really...
And that's within this monetary system, just so genetic lineage where it's most important. He grew up in New York, I grew up in New York, Trump grew up in New York, and this was the monetary, and still is the monetary system.
It's really hard to see your parents. I know you went through it. Mm-hmm. It's hard to see your mom and dad or not well.
If you have a sick parent, it's like torture.
It's really hard. Torture. So I spent the last 5 years looking after my dad. He was on dialysis and he was in pain most of the time. And we sat together and and I gotta tell you something, another guy from Massapequa is Jerry Seinfeld. Mm-hmm. And my dad and I would lie in bed every night, hold hands, and watch Seinfeld.
Oh, that's amazing.
And that was his greatest thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so you know what I mean.
Yeah, so it's like to give those little, to have those moments.
Yeah, and when I was a little kid, my dad helped me learn how to shower, how to put on my pajamas, how to put on my shoes. And as my dad, got not well,
reversed, yeah.
I would help him in the shower and help him put on his pajamas and his shoes. And that's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard because he's my hero.
Yeah.
And he was 190 pounds of muscle.
Yeah.
And he went down to 140 pounds.
Yeah.
And it's tough, but in our country, there are 40 million caregivers. Mm-hmm. And we have a country of 350 million people.
Right.
So 10% of the population are caring for people they love.
Yeah, of
course. So we can all relate.
Yep.
I know you said he was your hero, but I'm sure you were his hero. Yeah. You were his hero at the end as well.
I hope so. My dad one time, he was sitting on the edge of the bed and he said, I'm so sorry that you have to see me like this. you know, and I said, I'm sorry too, Dad, but, you know, you're my hero. And he said, you're my hero. And, you know, we hugged each other, and, you know, it's the thing of life.
And when I'm making these mentions at the moment, that is where I'm coming from, in the sense of I look out at New York and it's not something I'm proud of at all. But it is whatever it is, and it's changing, and it's not changing for the better, for certain. And again, like, that message comes from where I had a nicer beginning. The once it was time to have children, it did not go anywhere where something respectable would want me to be, but it is whatever it was. And so that's just the message at the moment. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken. And it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.